Trump's tariff war with Canada is hitting a wall, and it's not the one he wanted to build. While Donald Trump continues his relentless assault on Canadian goods with punishing tariffs, Canada's Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc just delivered a message that should make the former president sweat. The negotiations haven't reached a dead end, but Canada absolutely will not accept any baseline tariffs. This is the story of how Trump's economic bullying is backfiring spectacularly, and why his August deadline disaster is coming back to haunt him. To understand why Trump's tariff strategy is crumbling, we need to look at what's really happening behind the scenes. Trump signed an executive order on July 31st, raising tariffs on some Canadian goods to 35% effective at AM the next day, after the two countries failed to hit in August. One deadline to secure a new trade agreement. This wasn't just a negotiating tactic, it was Trump admitting that his deal-making prowess had completely failed.
Immediate lens, Carney says he spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump earlier this week in New York, that meeting coming around the same time Washington imposed tariffs on pharmaceutical goods.
We're engaged with the U.S. In ongoing discussions on some of those specific strategic areas. Those conversations are ongoing. I had a higher level conversation with the president a few days ago.
The latest tariffs would see 100% import taxes on pharmaceutical drugs, along with duties on other kitchen and bathroom items, furniture, and heavy trucks.
The latest developments show just how desperate Trump has become. Earlier this week, Prime Minister Carney revealed he had a high-level conversation with President Trump in New York, coinciding with Washington's imposition of new tariffs on pharmaceutical goods. The latest round includes 100% import taxes on pharmaceutical drugs and duties on kitchen and bathroom items, furniture, and heavy trucks, a clear escalation in Trump's economic warfare. But here's where things get interesting. Despite the ongoing trade war and U.S. tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, copper, lumber, and energy, 85% of trade with the U.S. is still tariff-free. That's because of CUSMA, the very trade deal Trump himself negotiated during his first term. The irony is delicious. Trump's own trade agreement is protecting Canada from his tariff tantrum. LeBlanc's testimony to the Senate's Foreign Affairs and International Trade Committee reveals just how desperate Trump's position has become. Canada has already removed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods that fall under free trade rules, specifically for products compliant with the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement. But this isn't capitulation, it's strategic positioning. Canadian tariffs on U.S. autos, steel, and aluminum remain in place, with Carney describing the move as matching U.S. tariffs on Canada. The timing of LeBlanc's comments couldn't be more significant. It's mandatory for Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to hold a joint review on July 1st, 2026, on the 6th anniversary of when CUSMA came into force. And before this happens, there must be public consultations. Trump knows this deadline is approaching, and he's getting increasingly desperate to secure some kind of victory before then. But Trump's latest moves show just how cornered he's becoming. Trump announced new 10% tariffs on imported timber and lumber and 25% duties on kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and upholstered furniture, using the absurd justification of national security threats. Trump signed a presidential proclamation arguing that timber, lumber, and furniture imports are eroding U.S. national security, claiming wood products are crucial to national defense. The desperation is palpable. What makes Trump's position even weaker is that there are no carve-outs for goods that comply with the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement in these new lumber tariffs. This directly contradicts his own trade deal and shows he's willing to break his own agreements when they don't serve his political purposes. It's the kind of erratic behavior that makes other countries question America's reliability as a trading partner. LeBlanc's refusal to accept baseline tariffs is particularly damaging to Trump's strategy. While some other U.S. trade partners like the European Union and the UK have reached deals with Trump by agreeing to across-the-board tariffs on their goods, Canada will not accept any deal with a baseline tariff. This completely undermines Trump's preferred negotiating tactic of using blanket tariffs as leverage. The August deadline failure continues to haunt Trump's credibility. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Trump jointly agreed to reach some sort of agreement on tariffs by August, a deadline the two sides blew past with no deal. For a president who built his brand on being the ultimate deal maker, this public failure is devastating. It shows the world that Trump's threats don't always work, especially against countries that are willing to stand firm.
Cabinets and heavy trucks. It's yet another blow to the hard-hit auto industry so closely intertwined with the American economy. CTV's Colton Prale leads us off.
For months, Donald Trump's tariffs have targeted what's inside trucks like these. But soon, it'll be the trucks themselves facing tariffs. The U.S. president says beginning Wednesday, medium and heavy-duty trucks will face 25% tariffs. But the White House has yet to specify what's impacted.
I don't know how it's going to affect our existing customers because we still have a couple trucks that deliver, and I'm not sure how those tariffs are going to affect it.
The federal government says Canada exports over $3 billion of medium and heavy-duty trucks to the United States. And what exactly is tariffed could change where the impacts are felt.
Trucks could be fire trucks, could be buses. And so we'll get a sense of whether this affects Ontario or Manitoba and Ontario or Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec.
Edison Motors is a new truck manufacturer in British Columbia, which focuses on electric trucks. They say American interest has been high, even selling to the U.S. government. But the proposed new tariffs mean now they're looking elsewhere for buyers.
I would rather focus on the Canadian, Australia market. Until the U.S. has a little bit more stable government, I'm going to be a Canadian manufacturer.
Trump's new tariffs, like those on autos, steel, and aluminum, use national security legislation as their justification. Trade lawyers say that makes them harder to fight against.
Really what this all means is this is something we're probably going to have to negotiate with the Trump administration.
The federal government recently announced $6 billion in support funds for businesses impacted by tariffs. Asked if it will be extended to companies hit by Trump's new tariffs, officials were unavailable to comment.
Colton, thank you. Happening in Washington later today, U.S. President Donald Trump will meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Trump is reportedly ready to share a new peace proposal in Gaza after a number of countries recognized Palestinian statehood at the UN General Assembly. Speaking on Fox News.
The impact of these tariffs is already being felt across Canada's economy. Canada exports over $3 billion of medium and heavy-duty trucks to the United States. And Trump's new 25% tariffs on these vehicles are forcing manufacturers to look elsewhere. One British Columbia electric truck manufacturer has already announced they're pivoting to Canadian and Australian markets instead of the U.S. The federal government has responded with $6 billion in support funds for businesses impacted by tariffs, showing Canada's commitment to weathering this storm. Trump's escalating tariff war is also revealing the fundamental weakness of his approach. Trump's use of tariffs has been a feature of his second term, throwing new obstacles at businesses already struggling with disrupted supply chains, soaring costs, and consumer uncertainty. These aren't just abstract economic policies, they're hurting American consumers and businesses who have to pay these tariffs. The lumber tariffs are particularly problematic for Trump's narrative. The lumber tariffs are particularly problematic for Canadian producers, given the Americans have also imposed countervailing and anti-dumping duties under a different tariff process. This shows Trump is essentially double taxing Canadian lumber, which will drive up costs for American homebuilders and consumers. It's economic policy that hurts Americans to spite Canadians. LeBlanc's optimism about reaching a resolution separate from CUSMA renegotiation is telling. He said he's hoping we can get progress before the review process formally engages, but also warned time will tell us if my optimism is misplaced. This suggests Canada is willing to negotiate, but only on terms that don't involve surrendering to Trump's baseline tariff demands. The broader context makes Trump's position even more precarious. More than 60 countries were hit with Trump's latest wave of tariffs, and despite global backlash and signs his own economy is taking a hit, Trump continues to promise even steeper tariffs ahead. This isn't the behavior of a confident negotiator. It's the desperate flailing of someone whose strategy isn't working.
Truth Social today saying that he is going to slap a 100% tariff on the film industry. He called out Gavin Newsom of California. What's going on here? Trump hinted at this last spring, and now here we are once again. Any idea why he's taking aim at the entertainment industry?
Yeah, the president has been on this for quite some time now, and it's been confusing for many people because it's unclear exactly how the tariffs will actually be collected. Do you collect them on the distribution? Do you collect them on ticket sales? It's just unclear how, in fact, this will work. And while the president, as we see once again, is attempting to use tariffs more as a weapon than as a tool to actually level the playing field on trade. What we're seeing with this is it's unclear exactly how this is working.
Trump's latest threat shows just how unhinged his tariff strategy has become. He recently announced on Truth Social that he plans to impose a 100% tariff on the film industry, specifically calling out California Governor Gavin Newsom. The confusion around how these tariffs would actually be implemented, whether on distribution or ticket sales, reveals that Trump appears to be using tariffs more as a weapon than as a trade tool. There's widespread uncertainty about whether Trump will even follow through with this threat, highlighting the chaos of his approach. Trump's own officials seem to recognize the problems with his approach. U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra said that at least for now, a larger deal with Canada is not going to happen. When your own ambassador is publicly acknowledging that your negotiating strategy has failed, you know you're in trouble. The CUSMA exemption continues to be Canada's ace in the hole. This gives Canada a huge comparative advantage over the rest of the world, which faces broad-based tariffs on nearly all exports to the US, and it's the best deal for any country in the world that currently exists. Trump created this advantage for Canada during his first term, and now it's protecting Canada from his own tariff war. Canada's strategic approach is working precisely because it's measured and principled. Carney emphasized the importance of preserving Canada's unique advantage for Canadian workers and businesses, while noting that Canada and the United States have re-established free trade for the vast majority of their goods. This isn't capitulation, it's smart diplomacy that protects Canadian interests while keeping the door open for reasonable negotiations.
Approach on any particular tariff measure that the United States is adopting. We are, of course, working for the benefit of the Canadian economy. One of the points in the speech that I made at the UN General Assembly today is, in fact, about our economic resilience at home. Canada is doubling down on our multilateral relationships, not only in defense and security, but also in areas of the economy, such as the WTO. We are forging new economic partnerships with partners. I cited the trade agreement with Indonesia last week, Mexico, and further efforts in the EU, for example. So this is all hands on deck for Canada in terms of defense and security, in terms of economic resilience, as well as, of course, standing up for our core values.
Let me drill down on that, because that's sort of a focus of the speech that you delivered, right? Here are the three planks of our foreign policy as we put it forth. Defense and security, as you mentioned, the second, economic resilience, and the third, core values. I want to pick up on the economic resilience part, because you gave some examples in Mexico, Indonesia, and in Europe. Your opposition at this moment in time says that you're essentially conveying something that isn't true. That in Indonesia's case, for example, that deal was actually arrived at in November of 2024, before this prime minister took office. That in Mexico, there's not anything really tangible besides an agreement saying that you want to work together more. That even in Europe, CETA is largely in place, in that there's no sort of proof of what those expanded relationships will actually mean for Canadians. Can you respond to that criticism that basically you're advertising something that...
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand has articulated Canada's broader strategy to diversify trade relationships beyond the United States, citing agreements with Indonesia, Mexico, and the EU. She emphasizes that 75 to 80% of Canada's trade with the U.S. continues under existing agreements, while Canada works to enhance relationships with other partners. This multi-pronged approach shows Canada isn't just playing defense, it's actively building alternatives to reduce dependence on an increasingly unreliable trading partner. The contrast between Trump's chaotic approach and Canada's steady strategy couldn't be clearer. While Trump lurches from one tariff announcement to another, using increasingly absurd national security justifications, Canada maintains its position that it won't accept baseline tariffs while staying engaged in the process. LeBlanc said he and other officials are in regular contact with their American counterparts about brokering a resolution to the ongoing trade dispute. Trump's Section 232 tariff abuse is becoming increasingly transparent. His increasing use of Section 232 comes as he awaits a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on the legality of his broader reciprocal tariffs on global trading partners, which 2 lower courts have struck down. Even the courts are pushing back against Trump's tariff overreach, forcing him to rely on national security justifications that become more ridiculous with each new announcement. The economic reality is that Trump's tariffs are taxes on American consumers and businesses. These tariffs are typically paid by the importer to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, meaning American companies and ultimately American consumers bear the cost. Trump's trade war is essentially a tax increase on Americans, disguised as foreign policy. LeBlanc's warning about a potentially bumpy road ahead shows Canada is prepared for Trump's continued tantrums. LeBlanc said he was hopeful the 2 countries can work through these trade issues while warning it could still be a bumpy road ahead. This is the language of someone who knows they're dealing with an unpredictable and increasingly desperate counterpart. The failure of Trump's August deadline strategy has fundamentally shifted the dynamics of these negotiations. Instead of Canada being under pressure to make a quick deal, Trump is now the one racing against time as the 2026 CUSMA review approaches. His own trade agreement has become his biggest obstacle to implementing the punitive tariffs he craves. Canada's position is strengthened by the fact that the CUSMA exemption provides a path to maximize the proportion of Canadian exports that avoid tariffs. And while Trump could pull the plug on it at any time, just as easily as he granted the exemption back in March, doing so would be seen as breaking his own trade deal. Trump's increasingly erratic tariff policy is damaging America's reputation as a reliable trading partner. When you impose tariffs on lumber and furniture using national security justifications, while simultaneously breaking your own trade agreements, other countries take note. This kind of behavior makes it harder for America to negotiate future trade deals and maintain existing relationships. The bottom line is that Trump's tariff strategy is failing because it's based on bullying rather than genuine negotiation. LeBlanc's statement that Canada won't accept baseline tariffs isn't just a negotiating position. It's a recognition that giving in to Trump's demands would only encourage more aggressive behavior in the future. As we approach the 2026 CUSMA review, Trump's position gets weaker by the day. His failed August deadline, his increasingly desperate tariff announcements, and his own trade agreement protecting Canadian exports all combine to show that his deal-making reputation is largely hot air. Canada's steady refusal to be bullied into accepting baseline tariffs is exposing Trump's strategy for what it really is: economic extortion that ultimately hurts American consumers while failing to achieve its stated goals. The irony is perfect. Trump's own trade deal is protecting Canada from Trump's trade war. And as LeBlanc made clear, Canada isn't backing down from its principled position, no matter how many lumber tariffs Trump imposes or how many national security justifications he invents. The Emperor of Tariffs has no clothes, and everyone can see it.